When Brian proposed to me, I felt like the happiest girl alive. We had been dating for 3 years, and though we came from very different families, our love had always been the strongest bond between us. My family is pretty relaxed and supportive, the kind of people who celebrate every little thing, while Brian's family is more traditional, controlling, and honestly, a bit cold. From the start, his mom liked to test me with subtle digs about how I dressed, how I spoke, or how my family wasn't as refined as theirs. At first, I brushed it off, thinking maybe it was just nerves about me being the first serious girlfriend Brian had ever introduced. But as our relationship got more serious, the comments became sharper. Still, Brian was my rock, always defending me, and I knew he loved me enough to stand by me no matter what. When he asked me to marry him on a quiet night at home, just us, it was perfect. He held out the ring and said he wanted a lifetime with me, not just a future approved by anyone else. That's when I felt certain that no matter what, his family couldn't shake what we had. The problem started as soon as we announced our engagement. His mom's reaction wasn't excitement but silence. His dad gave a stiff congratulations, and his sister, Emma, raised her eyebrows like it was some sort of joke. I remember feeling this sinking pit in my stomach, but I told myself that once they saw how happy Brian and I were together, they'd come around. After all, we were planning a wedding, not a war. My family immediately jumped in with support, offering to help with planning, my mom crying happy tears, my dad hugging Brian like he was already a son. The contrast was so striking it almost felt comical, except it wasn't funny when you were the one living it. As the weeks went on, Brian's family made their disapproval clearer and clearer. His mom called me one evening, not to congratulate me, but to question if I was really prepared to marry her son. She asked if I had considered how different our families were, and how Brian came from certain expectations. I kept my composure, telling her that Brian and I loved each other and that was all that mattered. She sighed dramatically and muttered, "We'll see." I hung up and cried later that night, but when I told Brian, he was furious. He promised me that nothing they said or did would ever change the fact that he wanted to marry me. His support made me feel safe, but I didn't realize just how far they'd go to try to ruin things. The first big blow-up happened during our engagement party. My parents had rented a small venue, decorated it beautifully, and invited both sides of the family. It was supposed to be a joyful event where everyone celebrated us. Instead, Brian's mom and sister sat in the corner with sour faces, whispering to each other and barely talking to anyone. At one point, Emma made a comment about how some people rush into marriage without thinking long-term. It was loud enough for me and a few of my friends to hear, and I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment. Brian immediately confronted her, asking what she meant, and she shrugged like it was nothing, claiming she was just making conversation. His mom, instead of diffusing the situation, told him to calm down and not cause a scene. My parents noticed everything but tried to keep the atmosphere positive for my sake. I plastered on a smile, but inside, I was boiling. That night, after everyone left, I asked Brian if he thought his family would ever accept me. He hugged me tight and said, "They'll have to, because I'm not going anywhere." Planning the wedding became even more stressful because of them. Every time we made a decision, his mom had something negative to say. When I showed her the dress I had chosen, she pursed her lips and said it was too plain for a bride. When we picked a venue, she complained it was too small for their side of the family, even though Brian and I were paying for most of it ourselves. At one point, she even suggested postponing the wedding, saying we were rushing into things. That was when I realized she wasn't just being difficult, she was actively trying to sabotage our plans. The worst part was, she didn't even hide it anymore. Things escalated when Brian's parents invited him to dinner one night without me. He came home looking upset, and when I asked what happened, he admitted they had tried to talk him into breaking off the engagement. They told him that I wasn't the right match for him, that my family background was too ordinary, and that marrying me would be a mistake he'd regret. Hearing this shattered me, because it wasn't just disapproval anymore, they were trying to cancel our wedding before it even happened. I asked Brian what he said, and he told me he had stood up, told them he loved me, and walked out. Part of me was proud, but another part of me was scared. If they were willing to go that far before the wedding, what would they do when the big day got closer? Despite everything, Brian and I pushed forward. We sent out invitations, booked our vendors, and tried to focus on the excitement rather than the drama. But his family wasn't done yet. A week later, I got a message from a distant cousin of Brian's, someone I had never even spoken to, telling me I should really think twice before marrying into their family. It was clear his mom had been spreading gossip about me. I showed Brian the message, and he was livid. He called his mom, and it turned into a screaming match over the phone. He told her to stop interfering, and she claimed she was just protecting her son. I sat there listening, realizing this wasn't going to be an easy road. By the time we were a month away from the wedding, I felt like I was in a constant battle. My family was my safe haven, always encouraging me and reminding me that this day was about love, not drama. But Brian's family kept circling like vultures, looking for any chance to bring us down. It was exhausting, and I started to wonder if maybe they'd succeed in ruining the happiest day of my life. As the wedding got closer, I started noticing more subtle ways Brian's family tried to interfere. It wasn't just the open disapproval anymore. They began questioning every little choice we made. His mom would call Brian late at night, saying she had concerns about the seating arrangement or the food menu. She kept insisting that their family's friends needed priority over mine, even though we had agreed to keep things balanced. When I suggested we keep it simple with a buffet-style dinner, she scoffed and said it would look cheap. Brian reminded her that we were the ones paying, but it didn't matter to her. It was like she couldn't accept the idea that we had our own vision. What hurt most was that she never once spoke about my feelings or asked me what I wanted. She treated the wedding like a business deal, not a celebration of love. I remember one day when she called me directly, something she rarely did, and told me that I should consider changing my maid of honor because Emma should be standing beside her brother, not one of my friends. I nearly dropped my phone from shock. My best friend, Claire, had been with me through everything, and she had been so excited when I asked her to be maid of honor. The idea of replacing her just to satisfy his sister was beyond insulting. I calmly told his mom that Claire was staying, and that was final. Her reply? "You'll regret alienating this family." It felt like a threat more than advice. Brian tried to shield me from most of it, but I could see the toll it was taking on him too. He wanted to enjoy being engaged, to look forward to our wedding, but instead he was constantly putting out fires his family started. One night, he broke down and told me he hated how they made me feel unwelcome, and that he was scared they'd try to ruin the actual day. I told him that as long as we stood together, they couldn't take our happiness away. But deep down, I was nervous. The rehearsal dinner was the moment everything boiled over. We had planned a small, intimate evening with both families, our bridal party, and a few close friends. My parents worked so hard to make it warm and special. But when Brian's family arrived, the energy shifted. His mom immediately complained about the location, saying it wasn't elegant enough. His dad sat at the far end of the table, silent the entire night, and Emma kept making snide remarks under her breath about how some brides like to hog the spotlight. At one point, I heard her laugh with one of her cousins about how she couldn't believe Brian was really going through with this. I wanted to scream, but I kept smiling, determined not to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. Then came the moment that almost destroyed everything. Toward the end of the dinner, Brian's mom stood up and tapped her glass. Everyone fell silent, assuming she wanted to give a toast. Instead, she launched into a speech about how marriage was a serious step and how she hoped Brian was making the right decision. She said she had her doubts, and that sometimes love blinded people to reality. I felt the blood drain from my face. It was humiliating, standing there in front of everyone, with her basically questioning if our marriage should even happen. My mom reached for my hand under the table, squeezing it in comfort, while Brian stood up, furious. He told his mom to sit down and stop disrespecting me. She refused, saying she was just being honest. Then Brian did something I'll never forget. He walked over, took the microphone out of her hand, and said, "This is my fiancée. I love her. And if you can't support us, then maybe you shouldn't come to the wedding at all." The entire room went silent. His mom's face turned pale, and his dad finally spoke, telling Brian he was being disrespectful. But Brian stood his ground, holding my hand, saying, "No, what's disrespectful is trying to ruin this for us." The rest of the dinner was painfully awkward, but in a way, I felt relieved. For once, Brian had drawn a line in the sand, right in front of everyone. Afterward, he apologized to me for how it all unfolded, but I told him I was proud of him. Still, I couldn't shake the fear that his family wasn't done yet. A few days later, that fear became reality. I received a call from the wedding venue. The manager sounded confused, saying that someone claiming to be the bride's mother had called to cancel the reservation. My heart nearly stopped. Thankfully, the venue checked with me before doing anything, but I was stunned. Who would do something like that, except his family? When I asked the manager what name the caller gave, she said, "Mrs. Howard." That was Brian's mom. I confronted Brian right away, and he was livid. He called his mom, demanding an explanation. She didn't deny it. She claimed she was just testing if we were serious about going through with the wedding, as if that was some kind of reasonable excuse. Brian told her she was officially not welcome at the ceremony if she kept this up. I could hear his mom crying through the phone, saying he was choosing me over his family. And for the first time, Brian said the words I had been waiting to hear, "Yes, I am. Because she is my family now." Even though his words reassured me, the drama wasn't over. As the big day approached, I couldn't help but wonder what else they had planned. If they were willing to cancel our venue, what would they try next? The week of the wedding was supposed to be filled with excitement, last-minute fittings, final checklists, and butterflies in my stomach. Instead, I felt like I was walking on eggshells, waiting for the next sabotage attempt from Brian's family. My family and friends did their best to keep my spirits up. Claire, my maid of honor, stayed over at my place the entire week to help me with details and distract me from the stress. She kept telling me, "Focus on Brian. Focus on your love. The rest is just noise." But it was hard to ignore the storm brewing around us. The first incident came with the florist. 2 days before the wedding, I received a call saying the floral order had been changed. Someone had called pretending to be me, canceling my white and blush roses and replacing them with lilies and orchids, completely opposite of what I wanted. At first, I panicked, but thankfully, the florist knew my voice and felt something was off. She contacted me to confirm, and I caught it before it was too late. I didn't even need to ask who might have done it. It had his family's fingerprints all over it. Brian was furious when I told him. He immediately called his sister, Emma, suspecting she was behind it. She laughed on the phone and said, "Why are you so paranoid? Maybe the universe is just trying to send you a sign." That one sentence was enough for me. I told Brian that Emma wasn't welcome at the wedding anymore. It broke my heart because I knew he had once been close to her, but he didn't argue. He simply said, "If she can't respect us, she doesn't get to be part of this." Still, I couldn't shake the dread that they were planning something even bigger. My suspicion was confirmed the night of the rehearsal at the church. While Brian and I were practicing walking down the aisle, his parents pulled him aside. I couldn't hear the entire conversation, but I saw the tension in his jaw and the way his fists clenched. Later, he told me they had made one last plea for him to reconsider before it was too late. His mom even said, "You don't have to go through with this. We can handle everything tomorrow if you change your mind." Brian told them that if they brought it up again, he would cut off contact with them entirely. That night, he held me close and whispered, "They can't stop this. They can't stop us." The morning of the wedding, I woke up feeling both excited and terrified. Claire was buzzing with energy, trying to keep me calm, while my mom helped me get ready. I looked in the mirror at my dress and finally allowed myself to feel happy. But just when I thought we had made it, disaster struck again. As I was about to leave for the venue, I got a text from an unknown number. It was a photo of Brian at what looked like a hotel bar, with a girl leaning in close to him. The message said, "Are you sure you know who you're marrying?" My stomach dropped. For a split second, doubt clouded my mind. But then I reminded myself of who Brian was. He had been nothing but loyal, nothing but loving. This had to be another setup. I immediately called him, my hands shaking, and asked where he was. He told me he was at the venue, helping set up the decorations with my dad. I asked him to send me a photo, and within seconds, he did, a selfie of him, sweaty from work, standing next to my dad and the groomsmen. Relief washed over me, followed quickly by anger. Whoever sent that message had clearly been trying to plant doubts in my head. I showed Claire the text, and she agreed it had to be his family. They were getting desperate, trying to rattle me on the most important day of my life. I deleted the number and made a promise to myself not to let them ruin my moment. When I arrived at the venue, everything looked perfect. The flowers, the decorations, the soft music, it was exactly what I had dreamed of. My heart swelled when I saw Brian waiting at the altar, looking at me like I was the only person in the world. For a brief moment, all the noise faded, and it was just us. But even then, the chaos wasn't done. Halfway through the ceremony, just as the officiant was about to continue with the vows, Brian's mom stood up from her seat. She loudly declared, "This is a mistake." Gasps filled the room. I froze, staring at her in disbelief. She continued, saying that Brian was rushing into a marriage that would end in disaster and that he was throwing his life away. People started whispering, and I felt tears prick my eyes. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, and she was turning it into a circus. Before I could even react, Brian stepped forward. He looked directly at his mom and said, "Sit down, or leave. But you will not ruin this for us." His voice was strong, commanding, and filled with determination. His mom looked shocked, like she never expected him to stand so firmly against her. His dad tugged her arm, trying to calm her, but she refused. That's when Brian made a choice. He nodded to one of his groomsmen, who quietly escorted his mom and dad out of the venue. The room fell silent again, and all eyes were on us. My hands trembled, but Brian squeezed them and whispered, "Focus on me. Just us." The officiant continued, and when Brian said his vows, I could hear the emotion in his voice. He promised to choose me every day, no matter what obstacles stood in our way. By the time I said mine, tears were streaming down my face, not just because I loved him so much, but because we had fought so hard to get to this moment. And we weren't going to let anyone take it away. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, the entire room erupted in cheers. For the first time in months, I felt pure joy, untainted by his family's negativity. We kissed, and it felt like sealing a promise, not just of love, but of resilience. Still, even as we walked down the aisle together, I couldn't help but wonder what his family would do next. They had already tried everything, canceling the venue, sabotaging the flowers, spreading rumors, even disrupting the ceremony itself. What more could they possibly have planned? The ceremony was finally over, and for a moment, I thought the worst was behind us. Brian and I were officially married, and nothing could change that. As we walked out of the venue with our guests cheering, I felt light, almost like I could breathe for the first time in weeks. My mom hugged me tight, whispering, "You did it, honey," while Claire was crying happy tears behind me. I glanced at Brian, and he looked at me with that proud, unshakable smile, the one that always made me feel safe. But I should have known his family wasn't done yet. The reception was held at a nearby hall, beautifully decorated with fairy lights and flowers. My parents had poured their hearts into helping us organize it, and the energy was magical. Our friends were laughing, people were complimenting the food and music, and for a little while, I let myself enjoy it. Brian and I had our first dance, swaying slowly to the song we had chosen months ago, and I remember thinking, this is what matters. Just us. But then, halfway through dinner, chaos began again. Brian's parents hadn't left the premises completely, even after being escorted out of the ceremony. They showed up at the reception uninvited. At first, they tried to slip in quietly, but I saw them the moment they entered. His mom wore a scowl, and his dad looked like he had been dragged along reluctantly. I froze, but Brian immediately noticed too. He went straight to them, demanding to know why they were there after being asked to leave. His mom, unfazed, said she had a right to see her son on his wedding day. The tension was so thick you could feel it across the room. Some guests even stopped eating, watching the scene unfold. Brian told them plainly, if you're here to support us, stay. If not, leave now. His mom crossed her arms and muttered, I'm here to make sure you don't make a fool of yourself. That was the final straw for me. I walked over, took Brian's hand, and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, we're not going to let anyone ruin this. His mom glared at me, but I didn't flinch. I think that moment shocked a lot of people, me standing up to her so openly, but it needed to be done. Things didn't calm down after that. A little later in the evening, when it was time for speeches, Emma suddenly took the microphone without being invited. She began talking about how marriage isn't always what it seems and how people sometimes wear masks until the ring is on their finger. It was obvious she was talking about me, trying to paint me as someone hiding my true self. I wanted to scream, but before I could say anything, Claire swooped in. She marched up, took the microphone from Emma, and said, this is not your stage. Sit down. The entire room applauded, and Emma stormed off, humiliated. Claire winked at me, and I felt so grateful to have her by my side. But the night wasn't done testing us. As the cake was being brought out, I overheard two of Brian's distant relatives whispering that they'd bet this marriage won't last a year. My chest tightened, and I wondered why his family couldn't just leave us alone for one day. Then, when it was finally time to cut the cake, something bizarre happened. The top tier of the cake was missing. At first, I thought maybe the staff had moved it, but then one of the servers whispered to me that a woman matching Brian's mom's description had gone into the kitchen earlier. My stomach turned. She had taken the top tier, the part we were supposed to save for our first anniversary. Brian lost it when he found out. He confronted his mom in front of everyone, asking why she would do something so petty. She claimed she was just helping because the cake looked unstable, but no one believed her. Guests were shaking their heads, whispering about how unbelievable the situation was. My parents tried to distract everyone with music and drinks, but the tension lingered. Despite all this, Brian and I clung to each other. When we finally got to dance with our friends, I tried to let go of the negativity and focus on the joy. People laughed, sang along, and toasted to us. It reminded me that we weren't alone. His family might have been determined to sabotage us, but we had a whole room full of people who loved us and were cheering us on. Toward the end of the night, Brian pulled me aside. He looked exhausted, like the weight of everything had finally caught up to him. I'm sorry, he whispered. You don't deserve any of this. I held his face in my hands and told him, you're all I want. As long as I have you, none of this matters. He kissed me, and for a moment, it was just us again, two people in love, against the world. But when we left the reception, another blow was waiting. Someone had slashed the tires of our car. My jaw dropped when I saw it, and I felt my knees go weak. Who would do that, if not his family? Brian was furious, pacing back and forth, while my dad immediately offered to drive us instead. The guests were shocked, murmuring about how far his family would go. But when we left the reception, another blow was waiting. Someone had slashed the tires of our car. My jaw dropped when I saw it, and I felt my knees go weak. Who would do that, if not his family? Brian was furious, pacing back and forth, while my dad immediately offered to drive us instead. The guests were shocked, murmuring about how far his family would go. I tried to keep my composure, but inside, I was shaking. It was one thing to insult me or mess with the wedding plans, but destroying property was another level entirely. As we finally drove off, with my dad behind the wheel, I looked out the window at the night sky. Part of me wanted to cry, but another part of me felt strangely strong. His family had thrown everything at us: his doubts, sabotage, humiliation, even destruction, and yet here we were, still married, still holding hands. They couldn't take that away from us. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. If they had gone this far on our wedding day, what would they try to do once we started our married life? After the wedding day chaos, Brian and I hoped things would settle down. We wanted to focus on being newlyweds, starting our life together, and maybe even laughing about the absurdity of it all someday. But his family didn't disappear quietly. If anything, they doubled down on their attempts to make our lives miserable. It started with phone calls. His mom would call Brian multiple times a day, leaving long voicemails about how he had betrayed his family, how I had manipulated him, and how he was going to regret choosing me. Sometimes she called me directly, saying things like, "You'll never fit into this family, no matter how hard you try." I blocked her number, but she just found new ways to reach us. Letters in the mail, emails from strange addresses, even messages sent through extended relatives. It was relentless. Then came the smear campaign. Brian's mom and Emma began spreading rumors about me, telling people in their social circle that I was a gold digger, that my family pressured Brian into marrying me, and that I was already causing problems in the marriage. Some of those rumors even made their way back to my workplace through mutual acquaintances. It was humiliating, and at times I questioned how much more I could take. But Brian stood by me through everything. He reassured me that none of it mattered, that we knew the truth, and that we had to protect our peace. The breaking point came a few months after the wedding. Brian's parents showed up at our apartment unannounced. They banged on the door until Brian finally opened it, and then his mom pushed her way inside, demanding to talk. She started crying, saying she wanted her son back, and accusing me of turning him against them. When Brian told her to leave, she refused, saying she would never accept me as his wife. That was when Brian finally snapped. He told her that unless she respected me, she would not be part of his life anymore. His dad tried to mediate, but even he seemed resigned to the fact that his wife wouldn't change. They left that day, slamming the door behind them, and for the first time, Brian and I realized we might have to cut them out completely. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was necessary. We stopped answering their calls. We stopped engaging with their drama. When they tried to reach us through relatives, we made it clear that we weren't interested. It was painful for Brian. He still loved his family despite everything, but he knew our marriage couldn't survive if he allowed their toxicity to keep poisoning it. Slowly, the noise began to fade. Without constant contact, the rumors lost steam, and the attempts at sabotage grew weaker. My family, on the other hand, was our safe haven. They welcomed Brian with open arms, treating him like a true son. Holidays, birthdays, simple Sunday dinners, they made sure we felt surrounded by love. And with time, that love helped heal the wounds his family had left. We built new traditions, ones that were ours alone, not tied to the negativity of the past. Looking back now, I realize their efforts to cancel our wedding only made us stronger. Every obstacle, every cruel word, every act of sabotage forced us to stand together, side by side, and prove our commitment. They thought they could break us apart, but instead, they reinforced our bond. Brian and I learned that marriage isn't just about love, it's about choosing each other every single day, no matter what storms come your way. To this day, his family still tries occasionally to reach out, but we keep our boundaries firm. Sometimes, I catch myself wondering if things could have been different, if they had just given us a chance. But then I remind myself, people show you who they are, and it's not my job to fix them. It's my job to protect my happiness, my marriage, and the love we've built. And through it all, one thing has never changed: Brian has never let go of my hand. No matter what his family tried, no matter how ugly it got, he chose me. And in the end, that's all that really mattered.